Among the religious laws of the Baha'i faith are that all people are entitled to a basic sound education. So why are Baha'is being denied this right in Iran? Education under fire today on Light of Unity. Welcome to the Light of Unity. I'm Nwandi Lawson. So imagine you're sitting in a classroom as a student and you're trying to memorize your lesson or some way study when all of a sudden armed guards come into your classroom. They speak with your professor. Other people in the room are very, very aware that the attention is focused on you. And then after a time, you're actually summoned and expelled from the university just because you don't belong to the correct religion. This is not the theme of a science fiction account. It's actually reality for hundreds of thousands of Baha'is who live in Iran. It's both historical reality as well as contemporary reality. So with more about how education is being meted out in Iran, we're joined today by members of the Baha'i community from here in Metro Atlanta. We have Nazanin Kharem with us, as well as Javid Farugi Arani. And both of you, of course, have moved to this country from Iran and so have firsthand accounts of how this situation is coming down. We should let viewers know that very recently, as far as just a few days ago, 7 Baha'i educators in Iran were each sentenced to 4 to 5 years in prison for educating Baha'is in that higher institution community, in the higher education institution community. I'd like to, though, start with you, Javid, because when you were living in Iran as a child, what was your experience like as a child who was going to school before the Islamic Revolution? Was there really a differentiation at that point between Baha'is and other students?
Yes, because when Shah was king in Iran, I was in the elementary school and middle school, and sometimes we had trouble with teachers because we have religion lesson. Do you know religion lesson is one subject of lesson in the school. So all the teachers of religion, they were very upset about when they heard about us. You are Baha'i, and they were so, okay, you can go out from class, you know, and when we have exam, you can come in, but now go out.
Wow.
But after revolution, they say if they understand we are Baha'i, they say, okay, go out of school.
Wow.
You cannot stay in the school, this is school. The principal and teacher decided you cannot stay in the school.
What about for you, Nazanin? Were you able to recognize even from a young age as a child that there was some differentiation between the Baha'is and the rest of the children?
You know, by the teachers and the students, no. I felt very much accepted and loved and respected, even the teachers. But once the news began to spread that the Baha'i children were getting expelled, I felt somewhat prepared and was expecting that this would also happen to me. And then the day came when they actually came and pulled me out of the classroom and summoned me to the principal's office. I was in 7th grade. I was 13.
Okay. And so describe that. You know, I gave a slight description of someone who might be at the university level, but what was it like for you, a middle school student?
I remember that day almost feeling in my gut that something was going to happen. And of course, my parents had prepared me. And I knew that one of these days this was going to happen to me. So when someone came to the door and asked for me, and asked me to go to the principal's office, I knew that this must be the reason. Why else would I be called into the principal's office? And some of my close friends also knew. I had told them that this could happen. So there was this sadness, you know, over the classroom, and I stood up and went with the person to the principal's office. And there, when I arrived, I saw that all of my Baha'i friends were seated on chairs all around the room. And then the principal stood up and she explained how as Baha'is we have been brainwashed by our parents and that we needed to come to our senses and recant our faith and accept Islam as our religion. and that if we didn't, that we would be expelled and we would be barred from education for the rest of our lives.
Well, the reality that you speak of, and we're going to get more of your story in just a moment, is the reality, as I mentioned, for the hundreds of thousands of Baha'is who currently do live in Iran. A new film, Education Under Fire, gives us a glimpse into what that situation is all about. Let's take a look.
It was always this chance of getting arrested or getting questioned and getting detained.
There are people who've been arrested who I know very closely, and they are in prison and their families haven't heard from them, and their only charge is education.
Baha'is in Iran have been consistently denied the right to access to higher education, and this is clearly a violation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
During the Shah, there was persecution of Baha'is, but it was limited. But after the revolution, it became the hidden agenda of the government. The plan was to deprive Baha'is from any cultural or economical progress.
On the 21st of May 2011, all across Iran, there was a simultaneous raid in homes in the wee hours of the morning. It was a planned attack on the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education. Equipment was confiscated, photocopy machines, computers, books, and then eventually individuals were just arrested.
It's really unprecedented anywhere in the world to find an entire community systematically excluded from right to education. The Baha'is have been the target of such a treatment. In order to counter this and provide opportunities for their youth to have college education, to gain university access, they have created alternative institutions.
And it amazingly worked. That sense of collaboration of people together. We were all there for the same reason, to learn.
Education is one of the most fundamental civil rights of any human being within any polity, within any republic. What the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education has done in Iran is nothing short of a miracle.
Nobody can ban me from being a human being. Nobody can ban me from learning.
And so Nazanin, in that video clip there, we could see kind of what the reality is for students in Iran, the Baha'is being removed forcibly from their classes. The day that you were actually removed, though, take us back now. You said you were all in the principal's office. The Baha'i children were all seated there waiting to be expelled. What happened next?
The interesting thing is you are looking at a group of students that were at the top of the school. Almost all straight-A students, well-behaved children, loved by all the teachers. So this was the ironic part. The principal stood up and explained that we had to recant our faith, that otherwise we would be expelled from school and we would not be able to return. And at that moment, she went and got this beautiful Quran. And she brought it. It was very ornate and beautiful. And she opened it and she read from the Quran how Muhammad is the last prophet and that this is the truth. My father had shown me a verse where in the Quran it refers to the coming of a new messenger from God. So I referred to that verse and brought her attention to the fact that this verse explained the verse that she had pointed out. This made her very angry.
I can imagine.
She became very inflamed and she began to scream at me and say, how could you stand up? And I'm the principal and you're the student and you're supposed to obey. And at this point, they took us to another room. And they closed the door and they were then going back and to deliberate among themselves about what they were going to do with us. Because I think I think they felt that if they bring us here and they interrogate us and they instill fear in us, that we are going to somehow give in. And they saw that none of us were giving in. There were probably between 10 to 15 of us there. And so they came back and they said, that's it, you go get your stuff and leave at this very moment.
And so you mentioned that you were all good students at that point
We were
as
all
well.
good
so you
students.
have a portion from your academic record there.
Yes, so I was given, each one of us were given a piece of paper that was a school letterhead, and on there it explained that we were students in good standing with good behavior. And so we were released with this piece of paper. With this piece of paper now, our parents were able to go to other schools and try and get us in.
Okay.
Hoping that they wouldn't ask about religion or why we were seeking to go to another school in the middle of the year. And so when they tried to get me to another school, somebody who knew my principal invalidated this writing and said that she's not a good student. She is a member of the Baha'i faith, and she has debated and confirmed this fact with her principal. And even upon independent study, I had also gotten into another debate with the principal of my new school. So once this was put on this document, of course, no school was going to accept me after that.
Wow. So Javid, Nazanin just mentioned that if she and the other students were to recount their faith, were to say that they were not Baha'is, they could have stayed in school. So why don't the Baha'is simply say we're not Baha'is?
Because in Baha'i faith, actually we had special class for all the students. It's like every Friday we had a spiritual class, Baha'i faith class. And so we learned, don't say lie, never.
Truthfulness is the
For
foundation
everything.
of all human virtues.
Yeah. So that's was the reason we couldn't say, for example, I am Muslim or I am not Baha'i, because we couldn't say lie.
You can't tell lies, that's right. Did it ever though, I'm sure you were in fear at the time that they were interrogating you. It never crossed your mind to say, I'm not a Baha'i?
It never crossed my mind. This was at a time where young children like Mona were being executed. So I was very proud that I was here and I was able to say that I was a Baha'i, and all of us really in that room. And we gave each other strength, and we helped each other to stand up on that day.
The world community is now looking in on the situation in Iran, and voices from all over the world are weighing in with their opinions about the injustice of denying young Baha'is access to education.
These universal declarations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the covenants, they reflect the very fundamental basic right of a human being and the process of thinking. No one can control our thoughts. They might control how or whether we can articulate, express loud these thoughts, but an individual aspires to freedom in this day and age, when we have to remind a government or a community of these rights. It's in this 21st century is an absolute absurdity. But unfortunately, in countries like Iran, almost every single provision in the Universal Declaration and in the other international human rights instruments are trampled upon. I remember even fondly the many years I spent in Geneva at the then United Nations Human Rights Commission. Every single year that I went there, in those years of long struggle for our own freedom, I always watched two Iranian gentlemen, one slightly tall, elegant, well-dressed, flawless French. He wouldn't speak English. And then a younger one, less dashing, very humble looking, both always walking together, and they were representing the Baha'i community in Iran. I was always impressed with them. Very well behaved, very proper, going and seeing everybody without making too much fuss. I heard their speech at the Human Rights Commission and talking about the discrimination and the persecution of the Baha'i community in Iran. And it is extraordinary, you know, the little I have read, I know, about the tremendous efforts they do to educate their children, their people. It's a beautiful story of how the mullahs in Iran banning Baha'i schools, and then they quickly organize themselves, teaching their children in the apartment, in the kitchen, everywhere, and with some Iranian Muslims joining in, showing solidarity and teaching them, because obviously anyone knowing what the Baha'is are doing to educate themselves must be inspired and touch such a commitment, such faith. So for them, we all owe solidarity. So youth in the United States and around the world should join in a mass movement of millions of people demanding freedom of education, freedom of worship for the Baha'i community in Iran.
Those words of support for the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education from Jose Ramos Horta, who was the Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Of course, as more international attention is coming to the issue of Baha'is being denied education, we know that this is not something, though, that has just started recently, even though the news coverage may have just kind of become more intense. And Javid, I'm wondering, in the years following the Islamic Revolution, when Baha'is were being expelled from school, how did the Baha'i community respond, and how were students able to get some education?
After the revolution of Iran, Islamic Republic closed all the university, and after 2 years they opened the university again, but they didn't let Baha'i students come back to university. And so Baha'i teachers and Baha'i people that have experience about education, they decided to have university, Baha'i university. Is like simple university, is like home to home, is like no building, no good stuff for that. That was very hard the first time when the university start. That was very hard, but the people and all the Baha'i people were volunteer for helping, for doing something for the students, for teachers. For example, when there was not building, they asked who can be host for example, this lesson or this time, and everybody was volunteer for doing something.
What about for you, Nazanin? What was your specific experience with that?
Very similar to Javid's. The community pulled together, the professional teachers and other professionals, even the Baha'i youth, the older Baha'i youth, they began to offer classes for the children who were expelled. So, like for me, one of the Baha'i women in our community who was a teacher who was expelled herself, who was fired from her job, she would teach me science and math. Her sister, who was not a teacher but was very good in Arabic, she was my Arabic teacher, and her son, who was at the time in 11th grade himself, he taught English to us.
Wow.
So a group of us, we had to be very discreet because otherwise it would seem as if there's a Baha'i meeting going on in her home. So several days a week in the afternoon, we would quietly, one by one, slip into their home, and they would welcome us, and we would sit around the dining room table and have our classes. And we were tested, we had homework. It was very professional. And we were taught so well by these volunteers who gave their time to us that at the end of the year, we were able to take exams.
So the regular standard exams that everyone else was
As an
taking.
independent study student. So even though they took all the rights for us to be in the school, but we could actually take the exam. And I think their hope was that we wouldn't pass. But in that first year, when we took the exam, many of the Baha'i children were at the top of the school with their grades.
That's amazing. So it appears that that was not very successful in wiping out education altogether for them.
It wasn't.
Well, you know, among the voices that are also weighing in on this issue internationally, you may know this one in a more comic role. It's actor Rainn Wilson, and although he is often very funny on The Office, he's very serious about the rights of Baha'is to have equal access to education in Iran.
I'm Rainn Wilson. This is my son, Walter. Like parents everywhere, my wife and I want him to have a life full of opportunity. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, however, Walter couldn't go to college. He couldn't be a teacher, or a lawyer, or a bus driver, or a dentist, or many other jobs, just because he was raised in the Baha'i faith. It's unbelievably cruel. The Baha'i faith was born in Iran in the 1800s. It stands for mutual respect, love and unity, equality for men and women, and universal education. But since its inception, Iranian authorities have systematically persecuted the Baha'i community. Tens of thousands of Baha'is have been imprisoned, tortured, and executed. And now, tens of thousands more are being denied the most basic rights, including the right to higher education. So in 1987, volunteer teachers and professors in Iran formed the BIHE, or Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, to give young Baha'is their only chance to study at a university level. This underground college's wide-ranging curriculum has uplifted the lives of thousands of Baha'is of all ages. Young Baha'is were finally able to study sciences and poetry and medicine and math, with classes in kitchens and living rooms and basements all across the country. However, in May, a series of raids and arrests shut down the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. Textbooks and computers were seized. Over a dozen school officials are now in prison for doing nothing more than trying to teach. We're all part of one human family. An attack on the minds and spirits of Baha'is in Iran is a strike against people everywhere. You can help. Please visit educationunderfire.com. If we've learned anything, it's that we all need to learn.
And so, Nazanin, you were speaking to the fact that the Baha'i students who were educated at home were actually very successful in what they were doing. So it appears that the attempt of the government to kind of squelch education was not very successful.
It was not. It failed miserably.
You're a great testament to that. I understand that you have a quote from the writings of the Baha'i faith that kind of speaks to the situation.
Yes, this is from the hidden words of Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah says, "O oppressors on earth, withdraw your hands from tyranny, for I have pledged myself not to forgive any man's injustice. This is my covenant, which I have irrevocably decreed in the preserved tablet and sealed with my seal."
Wow. So definitely a call there for any end to, it makes it very unequivocal that any injustice. I'm wondering, Javid, in your experience, this kind of oppression from the government, does it apply in general to the Iranian people? And I guess I'm asking, do Muslims attempt to oppress their neighbors because they're Baha'is, or is this something that's coming from the government?
Actually, let me tell you a story about my experience. When I was child, that time Shah was king in Iran, and Baha'i faith in Iran didn't have any trouble with government but we had more trouble with people, with neighborhood. For example, my neighborhood called me, that time I was, for example, 8 years old or 9 years old, but he called me Dog Baha'i. Oh, Dog Baha'i is coming, and sometimes
Dog.
Dog
Yeah,
Baha'i
yeah,
is like
yeah.
dog, is like bad word in Farsi, you know. And Baha'i faith had more community in Iran. We didn't have any trouble with government. We had feasts, we had everything. Baha'i faith had feasts, everything. But after revolution, little by little, we had more trouble with government, but we didn't have trouble with people. All the people, most of people, Iranian people, when they understood we are Baha'i, they could trust us. You are Baha'i? Okay, it's okay. You don't need to swear us. If you say everything, we believe you. It's like that. All my neighborhood, oh, we are sorry for you. You lost your job, you lost your education, like that. We are sorry, because they couldn't do anything, do you know, because they are afraid from Islamic Republic. But after revolution, that was a good news for Baha'i faith, because we had trouble with government, no with people.
So the neighbors were actually able to better get along with each other. That's
most of the people became friendly with Baha'i.
So Nazanin, what about those who are learning about this for the first time, or as the international community is becoming aware of it? What kinds of things can people do to be of assistance?
I think to give this matter attention and realize that not every child in the world has the basic rights that everyone enjoys in this country, and that these innocent children and youth are deprived of the most basic right to education. You know, Baha'i youth in Iran, they don't know what to do. They can't work, they can't go to university, and this was such a resource for them. This is something that they could gain some hope from, and to know that they can someday become a useful member in society.
Right. Javid, any final thought from you on how the world can help?
Actually, I want just to read prayer for us, for everything, because Nazanin read that prayer for us.
So
Every
prayer
prayer
does change things. We are aware of that. So Javid, Nazanin, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Light of Unity, sharing those insights with us. And if you would like to learn more about the situation in Iran, including the Education Under a Fire initiative and how you might be of assistance, you can phone 1-800-22-UNITE or go online to www.baha'i.us. I'm Nwandi Lawson, leaving you with the words of Baha'u'llah. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. See you next time for the Light of Unity.